Good evening. Hi, everyone. We're here again, Holistic Vet Sisters, 6 o'clock on a Thursday, UK time. And we're here to answer your questions. And we're also going to be talking to a lovely vet from Colorado. So, yeah, Denver, Colorado in the USA. It's the only place in America I think I've been. Have you been there, Lise? Have you been to Colorado?
I've not even been to the States ever.
Have
I've
you
been to I've
not?
been
Well,
to Canada and looked across, but I've not been to the States. No.
Well, that kind of counts. I had people from Canada that drove through America to get to Colorado to be on my retreat with their dog. So that was quite cool.
Wow. Well, you did a retreat in
I did a
Colorado.
retreat there, yeah.
Oh, that's cool. When was that? How long ago was that?
Oh, goodness. At least 4 years ago.
Well,
Yeah.
now you know Kristi, so
Well, this
then
is it.
anybody interested in Colorado can sign up and you can get together and do another one. And I'll be there.
Yeah. Fabulous. Fabulous.
For
Yes.
sure.
Anyway, so tonight's about Dr. Christie.
Yeah.
We were just hearing from her journey and pioneering work really, and how she really started to think and consider alternative and complementary therapies. Yeah, really, really powerful story, I think, actually, Christy. I don't know if you want to share it with the audience.
Sure. Yeah, so I am a conventional. I started my journey as a conventional veterinarian. I graduated from Texas A&M University in 2002, and I've practiced for 3 years in Dallas, Texas. And then I moved to Pennsylvania. I got married and moved to Pennsylvania for my husband to go to grad school. And we lived in Pennsylvania for 12 years. And while I was in Pennsylvania, I basically opened and ran a satellite clinic for a larger hospital. And so I was the one who built the furniture and I stocked the pharmacy, but I didn't own the hospital. So I definitely built it from the ground up, but it wasn't my own. And then when I started having children in 2000, around 2008, 2009, my family, we were having our kids were being born, and my husband and I were having a lot of health problems, and our just like nothing major, just like sinus infections, and then my kids, when they were born, they all had, not right when they were born, but as we were vaccinating them and as they were going through all the things that kids go with, they're exposed to, my kids had a lot of things that they were dealing with. My daughter had a chronic vomiting that would happen about once a month. And then one of my kids was born with a bunch of food allergies and couldn't eat a lot of different foods and would have hives. And then one of my children was born with a neuroimmune, not born with, but acquired a neuroimmune disorder during his early childhood. And I was very conventionally minded, so I didn't really think outside the box as far as what I should do to care for my children. I just took them to the doctor and gave them everything that was suggested and recommended and followed all that advice. And um, then we reached sort of a tipping point when my third child was born and he couldn't eat because he was getting hives. And I was breastfeeding him and he was even reacting to my breast milk. And so my husband and I were like, what is going on? This is not right. And at the same time, my husband had a chronic inflammation of his pericardium. He had chronic recurrent pericarditis. And so he was not well, and our children were not well. And we had a young family, and my husband and I were both really healthy when we were kids. And so the third child was kind of the tipping point for us where we were like, this is just not normal. And we took our kids to the doctor and we asked them, what can we do for this? And they basically gave us a lot of steroids and antibiotics and um, it was just a path that was not, I couldn't see the longevity in it. I couldn't see how you could possibly handle this situation with long-term steroids because I knew from my practice that long-term steroids didn't go well. And so that's when it was the advent of the smartphone, really. And so we had just gotten our smartphones and the World Wide Web, it was all that ability to get information quickly that we didn't have prior to that. And I remember saying to the doctors, like, I can't do this for my son. He's 8 months old, and I would like for him to live a full life, like to be 80 or 90 years old. So, how can he get there if he's on steroids for his whole life? And how can he grow properly and all this stuff? And they just didn't have answers for me. And so, thankfully, because of the rapid ability to get information from the internet and from the smartphones, my husband and I basically said we had a PhD in podcasts. I mean, we basically listened to whoever we could get a hold of for all hours of the day. We just had headphones or speakers or whatever, constantly gathering information. And we stumbled upon a podcast by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. You familiar with her?
Love her. I love
And
her.
she's, I don't know where she's from. She's European.
Cambridge, originally Cambridge, where I was from. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Well, and it was very hard for us to understand her very thick accent. But we were just glued to her, what she said, because this was the first time that I ever heard anyone acknowledge that the gut had a significant impact on what my children were experiencing. And she talks about allergies, autoimmune disease, dyslexia, autism, all having the same root. And we were like, yeah, our kids all have the variances of this gut problem that she's explaining in ways that make sense. And so, and then my husband too, like all of us were having issues. And um, so that podcast changed our life. And that was when we knew, okay, this is where we just went on a deep dive about the gut, understanding the microbiome. I learned how to make fermented sauerkraut, bone broth, which we still make to this day. I actually have bone broth in my crock pot at the moment. And so I learned about that very early. That was probably in 2011 that I listened to that podcast. And then we basically just, once you start learning all of this stuff, the doors stop closing in your face and you start seeing there's more and more I can learn about. And the more you learn, the more you want to learn. And you realize that it's all this, like, there's so much that we don't know. I thought I was pretty good vet before that. I was, almost 10 years into my career. I thought I was pretty good. And as soon as I figured out all the stuff I didn't know, I was like, wow, I really don't know anything because I've been putting my patients on these pharmaceuticals, and really this is a gut health problem, And then even my family cat, along with my children, my cat was also sick. And I got her from a rescue because she was septic after her spay. She was only 10 weeks old. And the rescue couldn't afford to care for her. And so I said, give me that cat, I'll take care of her. So I opened her up. I dumped pus out of her abdomen. I washed her with saline in her guts, like a washing machine. And then I sewed her up and put her on a bunch of antibiotics. And then she went on to have all the same type of things as my family was having. She had asthma, she had inflammatory bowel disease, she had skin lesions. And so she was kind of paralleling what was happening with my kids. And of course, I gave my cat all the vaccines. I mean, I repaired her from the sepsis and then I vaccinated her the next week. So I didn't know there was a problem with that. And so it was this perfect web of universe and divine intervention that led to where I am today, because I was forced to think outside the box and learn about things that I had never appreciated or known about before. And so anyway, to make a long story short, with my family, my children are doing much better. My children are all neurotypical. My son with the allergies is only gluten and dairy free now. He he doesn't carry an EpiPen. He does not have any anaphylactic reactions. My daughter is now at college and she's doing great as well. You know, all of that chronic GI stuff that she had resolved. My whole family is gluten free. We very much worked, you know, with Natasha Campbell McBride talks about the GAPS diet with the gut healing with the sauerkraut, bone broth. But we kind of did a combination of the GAPS diet, paleo, we did keto for a little bit on certain things. And I received my diagnosis in 2017. So it was when we were like 6 years into this for our family. And I believe that the cancer that I had lived with for several years. So I was extremely stressed when I was caring for my sick kids. And also I was sick too with them. You know, I was having problems as well. And I didn't take a breath to get myself well until my children were in a good place. And when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, it was stage 3C. So it was my entire left quadrant, like a gun smattering of cancer up even into my neck. And, but it wasn't stage 4. So it hadn't metastasized. There was no distant metastasis, which is unusual for the extent of local disease that I had. And I really do believe that because I had already started my holistic journey in the 5 or 6 years prior to my diagnosis, I believe my body was fighting as hard as it possibly could to keep that cancer controlled. And I do believe that the holistic journey that I had did a lot of good for saving me, you know, before I was diagnosed. And then as soon as I was able to take a breath and figure out what was wrong with me, and I got this diagnosis, you know, my family was in a good place at that point. And I believe that I had that mass in my breast when I was pregnant with my third child. And one thing I will say is that through this holistic journey, there's so much that's very spiritual and mind body. And one thing I would say for myself is that if I had found that cancer when I was pregnant with my third child, I was in the first trimester of that pregnancy. Maybe I wouldn't have had my child. You know, maybe I would have done different. I would have made different choices. And the other thing is, my second son had a real situation with his neuroimmune system. And if I hadn't had the ability to focus on him, I'm not sure that his life would have turned out the same way. And so I'm really grateful. I don't regret that I didn't find this cancer until it was stage 3C. If I had to do all of this over again, I would have done it exactly the same way. I would have done some things differently with my children's early pediatric care, but I wouldn't have done anything different with the sequence of events because I do believe very much that my diagnosis it came at the time it was supposed to come. And I needed to get my children in that place before that happened. And so then I took a year. I had just moved from across the country from Pennsylvania to Colorado for my husband's job, nothing to do with me. And I took a year off of practice to get acupuncture trained. And it was right at the tail end of the acupuncture training that I was diagnosed with cancer. And so again, I had prioritized the acupuncture training over myself. And one little interesting thing is that it took me 7 years to get acupuncture certified. I actually just got certified this summer because I had done everything for it, but I just didn't submit my final case report. And the reason I couldn't submit the final case report was because I had gotten that cancer at the tail end of that acupuncture course. And I had felt that that time that I had spent for the acupuncture training, I should have spent on myself. And so I had some resentment about that. And so I didn't get I didn't give that final report until finally the summer when I was in a good place. It was like, okay, it's time now for me to go ahead and seal the deal on that certification. You don't need the certification to put needles in an animal if you have a veterinary degree, you know? So, but then I went ahead and did it. And I'm glad I did. I feel like it's an accomplishment. It's like the final, like I finally like got to a place where I was accepting of what had happened to me and that I was ready to move on from it. So, and then for when I finished my own cancer treatment, I did go through all conventional treatment. I had 6 months of chemotherapy, radical mastectomy, all of my lymph nodes in my left arm removed, and 32 rounds of radiation. And radiation went up to my jaw. And they irradiated half of my salivary gland, and I was told that I would probably not have good saliva in my mouth because of that. And that, they were giving me, I went to the MD Anderson to a oncologic dentist, and she was telling me I was going to need to use these fluoride trays because I would have no saliva and I would get all these cavities. And so I would need to use these fluoride trays in my mouth. And I looked at that dentist and I was like, excuse me, I don't even use fluoride to brush my teeth. There's no way I can use a fluoride tray in my mouth. I said, I don't need that prescription. There's no way that's going to happen. And this was before the radiation. So then I went and found an acupuncturist, and there's actually evidence-based acupuncture for saving the salivation during radiation using acupuncture.
Wow.
And so then I went twice a week, all during my radiation treatments, and I have better salivation than anyone. My dentist goes on and on about how wonderful my salivation is. So just another example of where you hit a closed door, and you just need to find which door to open, because there's never a fully closed door, until where there is breath, there is life, right? It's like there is always another door to open until the body is ready to make that transition to the next phase. But I saved my salivation through with that. And then, but I definitely, I didn't have the knowledge that I needed 7 years ago to know what I was doing holistically. And I definitely, in my journey, I have run across a lot of humans that have tried to do holistic treatment for the extent of disease that I had, and it didn't go well for them, And so again, I don't regret that either. I did what I needed to do at the time that I did it. I had so much radiation in my lymph nodes removed, so I live with lymphedema in this arm. And so I wear a compression because otherwise my arm will swell. And that is annoying. And I do a lot of things to try to keep that under control. I did try to have a lymphatic bypass surgery, but it didn't do a whole lot. So that's something that I live with. I definitely live with chronic problems from the radiation. And so I have, so basically, when you're in the weeds with cancer, you have an advanced diagnosis, like for my human self, I needed what I needed to get me out of the weeds. But I did have the awareness that they were going to get me out of the weeds in the short term, but I was going to have to get myself out of the weeds in the long term. And I do think that acutely conventional Western medicine and all of the knowledge that they have saved my life. But I do believe that chronically, I'm here today because of holistic medicine. And so I had to do both. And so now basically I needed, because I had that awareness that I needed to do more than just radiation, chemo, and surgery. I needed to do a lot more. And so I basically built my practice because I needed $100,000 worth of equipment and for myself. And I thought my patients would benefit from that as well. And so I also couldn't go back to conventional practice and sell my soul because I knew better than the things that I was doing at that point. And, you know, for a very brief time, I worked for a corporate company, and they were a small corporation. The owner of the corporation had previously opened Sunglasses Hut. And he thought that we were just going to build this hospital and it was going to be like a sunglasses shop where people just come in and you just make millions of dollars, like with no effort really. But what happened is they were going to close down the hospital because of that, because we weren't making any money. And so basically, but in that short time, I learned, you know, he would give the company would give me a printout of everything I had done that week. And it would be like, okay, you only did 15 fecals and you should have done 35 based on the number of appointments you saw. And you only gave this many vaccines. And I'm like, they either need a fecal or they don't. I can't upsell fecals. So
I mean, those sort of targets are so damaging to your professional integrity, aren't they? It's a horrible way to work.
well, and so, excuse me, I have a little tickle. So once you know, with cancer, for humans and for animals, sorry, my voice will work its way out. For humans and for animals, there's such an emotional component of cancer. And I believe that all disease, you know, gut is very important, of course, but our gut and our brain are a super highway to health. And the gut and the brain speak to each other every moment, and they're constantly functioning in unison through the vagus nerve that's in the back of our neck. And so in order for us to find health, we have to be able to synchronize the gut and the brain in a very healthy way. And, you know, we have to break down the patterns and the ruts that our brain has been in for so long that are keeping us sick. And so that was one of the reasons, like, I had to leave the conventional realm of practice, because once I knew what I was doing and I knew how healing was helping myself and my family, I knew that I couldn't adhere to this like fecal thing where you have to run this number of fecals, you know, you just can't do that. And so, and I truly believe that if you practice passionately and you have good intentions for your patients, and you know, set proper boundaries with, you know, charging what you're worth, goodness will come to you. You don't have to upsell your services. You just have to be grounded in your practice and passionate about what you do, and set the appropriate boundaries so that people respect you and treat you as what you should be treated. You know, I mean, we are veterinarians. The amount of schooling and education and what we put into this is worth something, you know, and I worked really hard for that. So yes, I do deserve to make money, but I don't need to make money by upselling a test or something that's not necessary. And so I had that revelation, and basically that was how my practice was born. And I opened my practice in November of 2019. And I was by myself for the first few years. I didn't have any employees. And that got to be really a strain as well, because I was trying to do everything and be everything. And there was no buffer between me and the clients. So I was just always talking to people, you know, instead of talking to my family, I was just always texting my clients. And I was lost all of my time for myself. And so then I had to regroup and say, okay, Kristi, this is not healthy either. Like, you now need some boundaries, because you can't be everything to everyone at all times, and people need to respect your time, and you have to find joy that